Hello, everyone. How's everyone? 2 years ago, I was at a meeting in Whitestone, and Tori Ann, who's been with me almost every meeting I've ever gone to, she wasn't there that night. And I said to the crowd, I said, if I win this election, she doesn't know it, but I'm going to give her a ring. And somebody said, well, what if you lose? And then I said, I'll be in a bad mood. So it took a year and a half. I lost the election. I didn't give her a ring, but I figured time has gone by, so we got engaged 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas.
Yay!
The wedding is 2035, so give me some time to get ready. I was a little bit late tonight, and I made me think of a story. I showed up late one time in court, and the chief judge, Judge Case, said to me, "Do you know what time court begins, Mr. Shanahan?" And I said, "Yeah, when I get here." But the reason I think of that is I've spent my entire career now in the court system, 35 years. I started in 1989 in the court system as a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for 12 years. Then I also worked for Allstate as chief legal counsel for 5 years. And I've been on my own doing trials. Matter of fact, today I just had a case involving Denzel Washington's niece. And Denzel showed up and gave someone a $1,000 tip for being nice. It wasn't me though. But I've been in the system my whole life, just about. I have a long history. Unfortunately, we run against a lot of people that don't have a history in the system, and yet they become judges. So this is my 5th year, I think, that I'm running. About 50% of the people that I've run against were found unqualified by the Bar Association. And that's because people just vote down the line, and they don't realize that there are some judges that are not qualified, but they're there because they're Democrats. So 2 years ago, I ran against Evelyn Gong, who had never been in a courtroom in her life.
Oh, boy.
She was about 35 years old. We went to a Meet the Candidate night one time, and someone asked her what experience she has in landlord-tenant court, and she says, "Oh, I'm running for civil court." And then Tori Ann, who raised her hand and said, "Well, I have news for you. Landlord-tenant court is civil court." And she didn't even know it. And now she's a judge. She beat me by 1%. And
Wow.
you know what the difference was? The mail-in votes. They got 2,000 mail-in votes in Flushing. That's how close it was. I won the vote, but then the mail-in votes killed me. So that's how close it can be, and that's why it's important to get everyone that you know to say, hey, don't just vote for the top of the ticket. Just don't vote for this year it's going to be mayor. Hopefully everyone votes for Republican mayor, right? But go down the line for Republican judges. So that's important to tell people, not only to go out to vote, but vote down the line to make sure they vote for Republican judges. The difference is between what Republican judges and Democratic judges is the Republican Party really, I believe, in my heart, looks at the candidate before they put them up. If you see that tonight, everyone running, and last year all the Republicans running had great experience in the system. And we ran against people that had no experience. Even the judges in the appellate division. I was in the appellate division 2 weeks ago, arguing a case on an attempted murder case. There were 4 judges. I looked at their history. They had no criminal court experience before becoming judges, and now they're appellate judges. Their experience was they were all head of some club, the Asian attorney, the Latino society, the Black Society of Lawyers. That's not how judges should get picked, because they fit some profile, what boxes they check, and Tori Ann gets mad all the time, more than me, because I'm used to it. But when you hear the Democratic judges talk at some of these meetings, it's out and out racist what they say. So the Chinese judge, we're in Flushing, and she says, "You need someone that looks like you to be a judge." Now, can you imagine if I said that? You need a short, balding man who looks like you, to be a judge. But yet they say that. And last year, we were at the NAACP Meet the Candidate night, and the black judges said, you need someone that looks like you on the bench. And it's just, to me, that's just completely wrong. But they get away with it. And I would never say anything like that, because what you need is a judge that can listen to the law fairly, impartially, and knows the law and treat people with respect. Right? I always say it's demeanor and education and knowledge. Demeanor and knowledge is what makes a good judge. Very rarely do you meet a judge that has both those. You meet judges that may know the law, but they get angry at the drop of a hat, or you get judges that are nice, but they really don't know what's going on. And so I started as a prosecutor, and I worked my way up, and I've tried some very serious cases. I've on both sides. I've prosecuted people. People always say, you know, what do you like better? I say, well, I like being a prosecutor better. And they said, well, why did you become a defense attorney? I said, because you make a lot more money getting him out than putting him in. And you know, it's a fact of life. You know, you don't make much money as a prosecutor, but you know, but I do justice. You know, people say, how can you represent guilty people? Well, I'm not. That's my goal is not to get guilty people off. My goal is to make sure that the Constitution is applied in every case, because everyone has a right to a fair defense. And you'd be surprised. Everyone thinks I'm always representing murderers and rapists. I'm not. I'm representing a young kid who maybe made a mistake, had one too many beers at the bar, and got pulled over. You know, now you're gonna ruin his life by saddling him with a conviction. You know, maybe a kid that is hooked on drugs, maybe a kid that has a mental illness. I mean, this is my common everyday cases. I have a kid right now who schizophrenia kicked in. He went into a house, took keys of a car, and drove up to Westchester. He has no recollection. For some reason, and a lot of these kids are smoking marijuana at 18, 19, and it's schizophrenia is kicking in. So my job is to try to help people sometimes, to make sure that, you know, their life is not ruined. And so that's what my job is. And in the civil court, I don't necessarily, if I was elected, I wouldn't necessarily do civil, because civil is also criminal. What happens is, if you win the civil court seat, if your experience is mainly criminal, like as it is with me, they would more likely than not put me on the criminal bench, where half the judges already are my friends. I know half the judges because I've come up through the ranks with them. It would be a very easy thing for me to do. But again, how do we do it? By telling people to vote down the line. And if we can do that, get the word out, that's half the, you know, every year we've done very much better. Last year, every year we get a couple more percentage points. The Queens is starting to get more and more, and now we're only, I think we lost, what did we lose by last year? 7%. It was like 57 to 63 or 43. Now that's like a 7% turnover. So you never know what can happen. And we hope that the residents get smart enough in Queens to say, hey, something needs to change, you know, and so we'll see what happens this year. And I know a lot of people always ask landlord-tenant questions. That place is a horror, right? If anyone has a tenant or an issue with landlord-tenant court, it takes years to go through the system. Why anybody would want to rent an apartment out in Queens, I don't know, you know, and because every time I go to these meetings, people ask the question, what would you do in landlord-tenant court? And I say, I'm not going to adjourn cases for 6 months at a clip. You know, that they come in, whether it's a landlord or tenant, doesn't matter. Let's move these cases. There's no reason why the first court appearance shouldn't be 1 year. And that's what's, and then they said, well, we're going to make a motion. All right, adjourn it for another 6 months. Oh, Judge, I need an adjournment. All right, another 6 months. Years go by. Now, I practice in Queens and Nassau. In Nassau, landlord-tenant court, cases go a couple months. You can get somebody out. In Queens, that same case is going to bring 3-4 years.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. So that's why we need judges and Republican judges, because Republican judges are no nonsense. Okay, we're not saying we're going to be lenient or toward one side or the other, but you got to apply the law. We're here to work, to move these cases. So we need that. We need judges that are going to be no nonsense, enforce the law, and move these cases. And hopefully, we'll get smart, and the county will get smart, and we'll make a change, and we'll make a difference. So, Joe Casper ran so many years, and he finally won. So we're all hoping that he's, Joe Casper, I know Joe from one of my first days in St. John's University when I met his brother in a class. I was taking criminal justice, and I met his brother Michael, and he brought me over to see Joe and got involved with politics back then, and so it's been over about 40 years since I know Joe.
Wow.
And he hasn't changed. But so if get the word out, let's go down the line, let's go down Republican line, let's try to make a difference. Okay? Thank you all. Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing.
Let me just repeat the question.
Yeah, she's asking, how is it that the landlords just get thrown into, they're slumlords, and here's the thing: when you're talking about slumlords, you're usually talking about people that own a multi-family dwelling. All right. About 80% of the cases in landlord-tenant court involve two-family houses, where it's a private residence, a guy who saved his whole life to buy a two-family house. And now he's bought that house, he's paying the mortgage, and he thinks that he's going to be able to supplement his income and pay off this mortgage. And he gets stuck. Now, so a slumlord landlord technically is someone who doesn't maintain the building. Maybe the place is in disarray, there's no gas, there's no heat. That's a slumlord. Most people that I see in landlord-tenant court, they're just trying to get them to pay the rent. They're not slumlords. Judges have to see that.
I understand that, and that's why I'm bringing this forward. There should be a distinction between the slumlords and the residents.
Well, there is no legal distinction. Slumlords is a slang term. So when you go to court, they don't say, he's a slumlord or she's a slumlord. Yeah, but they don't. The Chinese have a name for tenants who don't pay the rent. And I was reading about it, and there's a certain word that they say in Chinese. I forget what it was, but by the way, running in Flushing, I've learned enough Chinese that I can convince you that I speak Chinese. They said, 我是中国人，你好，我好很白，谢谢.
Wow.
Which means, hello, how are you? I am Chinese. And then they usually say, they look at me and they say, no, you're not. And I go, oh, yes, 我是中国人. But they actually have a word, the Chinese landlords, for tenants who don't pay the rent. And but there is no legal term for slumlord. That's a slang term. But again, the judges have to look at it. What is the complaint? Many times it's the smoke alarm is missing or something like that. That's not a slumlord. A slumlord is someone who turns off the heat, doesn't keep the appliances up to and things like that.
You're not answering my comment.
Yeah.
My comment is forgetting the description of the slumlord. Okay? The landlords that are abusive versus the landlords that are just trying to survive.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that is the issue. There are so many landlords just trying to survive. And when you go to the clerk's office at the landlord-tenant's office, if they think you're a tenant, they are more than happy to help you. When you say, I'm a landlord, they say, oh, you have to get a lawyer. The system is slanted against landlords. And we have to stop that. Yes. Yes, George.
I am very proud to see the candidates that came out here tonight respecting this club. This is a fabulous organization. Where are all the other candidates? if I wasn't a victim of the rent moratorium for over $85,000, I would be running for borough president right now. Where is our candidate? Where are all the other candidates that you gentlemen have chosen to come here and respect this applause, which is growing every month? I appreciate that. The thought that prompted me to ask a question is you were saying that the open doors concept of people want to vote for somebody who looks like them. So this year we have had an emergence of, there is a Queens Republican Asian caucus, there is a Queens Republican Indian caucus. Have any of these organizations reached out to you gentlemen and said, please come to speak to our people? Is that door open for you, or it ain't happening?
Well, there is a large contingency with the Chinese Landlord Association, because the Chinese are the #1 ethnic group for home ownership in this city. They have about 50% of people who are Chinese immigrants own their own house. They believe in home ownership, and they try to supplement their incomes by having a two-family house. And they really worked hard for me 2 years ago when I was running in Flushing. They really went out of their way. But unfortunately, in the deep ends of Flushing, we lost it. But I won every district. But the Chinese Landlord Association was really in my corner, really pushing me, because they're fed up.
In answering my own question, you have not heard from these two organizations saying, please come to our meeting, we'd love to have you.
No. Matter of fact, the Bar Association last year said to me, they said, didn't we interview you last year and the year before? I said, yeah. They said, well, why do you keep running if you keep losing? And I said, well, I enjoy it. I enjoy going into the community, talking to people, talking about the issues, and educating people. So this is what I like. This is what I want to do. I didn't grow up to be a politician. You know, there were so many people that we see. That's what they grew up to become politicians. I said, did you ever have a real job in your life? They said no. Yeah, well, but it's democratic welfare to become a politician. You know, all these people that we have in the city council, that half of them never had a job, and what they do is they have all these non-for-profit organizations that their family runs. The city council loves non-for-profit organizations because they can get their brother or wife or someone to be the president of a non-for-profit organization where they're making $200,000 a year. And so it is a form of public welfare being in government. I'm going to be 62. I never ran for politics. It wasn't until a few years ago that they asked me to run for judge. I don't want to be a politician. I grew up I worked, I went to school. This is what I want to do. I want to work. I'm not a politician. And we have too many people that think becoming a judge is a retirement. A lot of people say, oh, I could be a judge now. I have no boss. I can come and go as I please. I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. No. I want to be a judge because I want to work. This is how I was brought up. But you have too many people in government that just say, okay, this is early retirement for me. You know, ma'am, did you have a question?
Yeah, I actually did. I want to go back to something you said. You were talking about qualifications, because this is about winning races. And to me, it seems like there's a messaging problem. If you know, like, that you're running against somebody that's not qualified, you need to get that information out. And the way to get that information out is being backed up by all the associations throughout, especially for a position that you said is all of Queens.
Yeah.
So you need the backing of all the communities. Why isn't there someone that's doing that? Because honestly, people don't know that the person you're running against has never been in court before. So how do we get that message out?
Well, first of all, the press always backs the Democrats. I don't.
True.
Mike, what's the that newspaper? Legal Eagle or something? Queen's Eagle? Was it?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking like boots on the ground.
Yeah. Legal Eagle. Queen's Eagle, I think it is. And they last year they put out an article about who was running for judge.
Right.
Didn't mention any Republicans. It was only Democrats. I've called them numerous times, and I say, what about me? How about interviewing me? And they don't do it.
So that's why the messaging has to come from within the Republican Party, and the Queens, whoever is overseeing Queens Republican Party, needs to pull all the groups together, have a fundraiser, and promote all the candidates.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Queens Republican Party. I wish that was a little bit more cohesive,
Yeah.
you know? I don't want to say anything because I'm being videotaped. Take that off, I'll tell you. No.
I will.
I'll edit it. He's running and he's, anti-crime and says, by the way, there's a couple of judges on the ballot that have never been in court. Like, get them to be your voice as well.
Yeah.
I mean, get Alicia, get all the Vicky. Let them know.
Vicky's
and
great.
Get their voices
Vicky's
out.
great.
They will.
Unfortunately, there was a district in Rockaway that covered
Right.
part, and that we did very well as a Republican Party there last year, the presidential year. Unfortunately, they gave it to the Democrats. The Republican Party in Queens gave it to the Democrats. You
I
know?
feel like you're working a bubble here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Middle Village. How many people are here? 30 out of how many residents of Middle Village?
Yeah.
Can we get flyers that they even know that there's a meeting here tonight? Because my
Yeah.
neighbors don't know that there's a meeting here tonight.
Yeah. Well, it is a numbers game. We're dealing with, 70% of the people are Democrats. But out of that, there's out of that 70% are people like what my parents were, right? A lot of people probably here too. Our parents were Democrats,
Yeah.
right? But we vote Republican, But yeah, it would be great to get the word out. That's why for the last 5 years I've been going to any meeting, anybody that asks me, I'll go and speak. That's the Italian side of me. I like to talk.